Hello, my name is Sam Feltham, the Director of the Public Health Collaboration, and welcome to our 2021 virtual conference. It's been a difficult year to say the least, but I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to all of our ambassadors, members, patrons, and scientific advisory board members for all of your support through these difficult times. Without you, we would never be able to continue to better inform the public about the power of lifestyle to help create a better world. Now, before I let the next presenter speak, this conference is 100% free for all forever. However, if you find the content here today valuable, then please consider a £2 donation or whatever you can afford via www.phcuk.org/donate, or if you're in the UK, you can simply text PHC to 70660 to donate £2 directly from your phone, and of course texts are charged at your standard network rate. We hope you enjoy the conference from wherever you are in the world, and be sure to get involved in the civil conversation here on YouTube or by using the hashtag PHCVCon2021 on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for your support and be well.
Hello, and thanks for joining my presentation. My name is Ian Lake, and I want to talk to you today about the build-up to and the results of the 05100 project. It's suitable for everyone. It has particular interest for people with type 1 diabetes, but also people who love getting out and about, doing physical activity, and those interested in metabolic health. So sit back and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm just going to switch the slides on, so there might be a slight gap. Just bear with me. So there are the group of 8 people that managed to complete the run in September 2020. They are, from the left, Steve Bennett. He's a businessman very interested in promoting low carbohydrate lifestyles and has a business based around that. Behind him is myself, who has type 1 diabetes. Next to me is Trudy Deakin, who is the owner of Expert Health and runs several expert patient programs, which some of you may have been on. And they're very good quality programs. Next to her is Ali Ibrahim with his hands on his head. He's a consultant psychiatrist who specializes in eating disorders. And that was very useful in the early days when we got a lot of criticism for promoting those, and we managed to explain ourselves away because of Ali's help. Next to Ali is Gail Gerry, who is a practice nurse in Solihull and also is a strong advocate of ketogenic and low carbohydrate lifestyles to manage metabolic disease. Behind Gail is John Furness. He has type 1 diabetes. He transitioned to a ketogenic diet and it transformed his life also. And he is keen to do science based around type 1 diabetes and keto lifestyles. Next to John, just in front, is James Cracknell. Some of you may recognize him from the TV. He is also a gold medal Olympic rower. He's won 2 gold medals. And he is largely carbohydrate adapted, but was very keen to join this program to see what the effects of ketogenic lifestyle would be. And at the front there holding the flag is Jake Thompson. He's the son-in-law of Steve Bennett and works with Steve and very interested in low carb lifestyles. So the question is, why did we have to do this project? Well, I came up with this in the early part of last year, in about January, and I was taxing my brain to think, well, why are we not really making much headway with providing information on keto lifestyles and type 1 diabetes? Is there something that people are unsure of? Anecdotally, I get various stories coming back from patients who tell me that their doctors and healthcare professionals are unsure of certain areas of this, and some are a little bit less positive about it than I think they should be. But I transitioned to a keto lifestyle and it made such a difference. I just want in the early part of this presentation to go through why I'm so passionate about this subject. So I've been on usual care, which is eating shed loads of carbohydrates and shooting up insulin to try to balance the glucose against the carbohydrates. That's called usual care. That's the main offering in the UK. And that is what the guidelines suggest we provide, although there is some flexibility around that. At the moment, there are a minority, but an enthusiastic minority of specialists providing help and information for people to transition to low carb. So we are making slow progress, but overall, the message is that the high carbohydrate diet is the preferred option for the UK. I've had 2 disabling hypos and not very nice. I woke up after a period of unconsciousness with ambulance personnel attending to me. I've done pretty well everything you shouldn't do in type 1 diabetes. I've forgotten my insulin. I've run out of insulin. I've double injected because I forgot to take the previous dose. I've injected through the genes and broke the needles, etc., etc. Had a whale of a time. So transitioning to a ketogenic diet made such a difference from day one. That's my trace in the green box there. That's since keto, last 6 years. The bottom of the yellow arrow is 42 millimoles per mole, which is the normal HbA1c for a person with no diabetes. And as you can see, for most of the time, I'm achieving that. Prior to that, if you look at the blue zone on that diagram, I was doing reasonably until the 3 years when I sort of defocused for other reasons on my diabetes. But before that, I was hovering between sort of 50 and 60, sort of 7.5 sort of area. And that was the nice guideline target at that time. So there was no concern about where I was going with this. But I had, quite deteriorating health, really. And I luckily discovered a keto lifestyle through Googling for something else. And I want this option to be provided for people at diagnosis and ongoing, so that if people with type 1 choose to take on the ketogenic lifestyle, at least they're aware that they have an option. At the present time, most people report they're not aware they have an option. It may be worse than that, as we'll see later. And these are the things that people don't talk about when I say deteriorating health. I'm lucky in that so far I've avoided complications. But these are the day-to-day annoyances that get in the way. Postural hypotension, standing up and feeling dizzy, palpitations, walking up one flight of stairs and having to stop because your heart's bumping away, muscle pains, joint aches, mental dullness, just feeling a bit foggy because your sugar's swinging all over the place, ditto visual symptoms, mostly blurred vision. So I did a survey on my website, type1keto.com, and 120 people responded. This is the response they gave. So you can read the column on the left, which is the people that reported the symptoms of complications, what you call non-serious complications, if you like, of type 1 diabetes. And roughly half of people who have type 1 diabetes on this survey had symptoms. And you look at the middle column, just about everybody who had symptoms had a degree of improvement. And if you look at the mental dullness, it increased by 70, the mental clarity improved by 78%, and the visual symptoms improved by at least half. And there are improvement in palpitations, muscle pains, and also postural hypotension. The slight worry is that with this sort of diet, people who attempted to go onto keto found that their symptoms worsened. So 52% had symptoms, and of those people that went keto, 22% felt that it got worse as a result of going to keto. And that needs to be investigated more, and I'll be doing that in the future. But I think it's because people were transitioning to keto, their blood pressure was dropping, and if they were on blood pressure lowering medications, they may have found that difficult to taper down the medication, because 90% of these people actually go it alone. They find information on the internet and don't get any help from their healthcare professional. They can get support, but very rarely do healthcare professionals initiate the conversation. In fact, from my survey, the people reported that fewer than 7% of healthcare professionals initiated a conversation about low carb lifestyles. And very worryingly for me, 51% of patients were actively discouraged from going very low carb by a healthcare professional for whatever reason. Clearly, they had their reasons, undoubtedly based around patient safety. But when you look at the figures on that table, you begin to wonder why we should not be offering the option for people to at least try to see if it applies, if they can benefit from the keto lifestyle. And not only that, I haven't mentioned hypos, but hypos are a constant annoyance to people with type 1. We've always got half a mind on a hypo. And in 77% of people that responded to this, they improved their hypo frequency by at least half. So they reduced their hypo frequency by at least half. And 35% had more than 3 times fewer hypos. Now, if you've ever had a hypo or you're vulnerable to hypos, as a person with type 1 diabetic, you'll know that that is an amazing figure. And, you know, to point out this to patients, just that alone is enough to probably want a patient to go and look it up. Because, you know, as bunch of type 1s, there's only 1 in 150 of us that actually have the condition. Mostly we're reasonably well controlled and stay out of trouble until the final years. And we're hidden. And even within the medical community, the focus at the moment is more on metabolic disease and type 2. And type 1 is not achieving what I think should be the prominence that it deserves. Because, you know, we've all been on busy urban roads where we need people to be sharp. It's not easy driving on a road you don't know. And, you know, if you're denied the opportunity to improve your mental clarity by 78%, if you're denied the opportunity to improve your vision by 51%, you're vulnerable as a person with type 1. The last thing anyone with type 1 wants to do is to harm anyone, especially when driving. If that kid crossing the road is hypo because that kid's diabetic, you know, the parent doesn't want that child to run out in front of that car if that car hasn't stopped. So even though type 1 is seen as a niche, it actually does affect everyone. How well controlled do you want that car driver with type 1 diabetes to be? I think it's our responsibility as healthcare professionals to provide people with this information so they can make the choice as to what they want to do. The other reason that I got interested in this 05100 was this audit. This audit data hasn't changed for the last 5 audits, so I've looked them all up. And the red arrow pointing down, this is the National Diabetes Audit for England and Wales and includes 97% of people with type 1 diabetes. And the red arrow pointing down is the number of people that are achieving an HbA1c of 6.5% or 48 millimoles per mole. Modest, but quite an ambitious target. And as you can see from that arrow, fewer than 10% of people are achieving that target. So 90% of people are not achieving the target, which will help them to stay out of trouble with respect to long-term complications. And you know, why is that? Why are 90%? Is it that we're not bothering? Because I was in that category when I was on usual care. It's not that I wasn't bothering. I was trying really hard. I felt a failure not to be able to achieve that target. But it is not easy. And clearly, 90% of people don't find it easy. The fact that 10% can do it doesn't mean the other 90% aren't bothering. It means that the lifestyle choice isn't the right one for them, because looking at the up arrow on the right, if you give people the opportunity to improve their HbA1c, they will take it, because 90% of that therapeutic gap, as I call it, 90% of those people who aren't achieving good control, suddenly with a different diet are achieving good control. So it's not the patient that's failing the diet, it's the diet that's failing the patient. And it's so important, looking at all those that information I put in earlier, it's so important that we provide options for our patients. You know, they might take a look at it and say, no, I don't want to do that. my doctors advised me to continue eating donuts. Some people do, and if that patient wants to do that, that's entirely their choice. But I think it's such a shame if people do not know and then go into a harmful state because of ignorance. If anybody wants to look up that 90% figure, if you just screenshot that, that will give you the references you need. So off we trotted. A lot of preparation required ahead of the game. We had 2 bites at this. We planned to do May. That was cancelled because of COVID. So then we went for September, and luckily we got a small window of opportunity. It was done in September in glorious weather. And that is as on the 2nd day, still feeling good, but probably a little bit hungry. And the first thing about this project was that we wanted to look at the fat tank. We wanted to say that the fat tank is available for energy along with the glycogen store, and that the glycogen store is available for us if we want to perform anaerobic exercise, which needs glucose. When you tell people about this project, they take a step back and they say, well, what are you going to eat? Won't you be hungry? Well, yes, we might, but what I was trying to say is you don't need your fuel in your stomach. You need your fuel processed ready to go in either fat or glycogen. You don't need to worry about eating for sugar because one, you don't need sugar for energy, apart from critical functions of the body, which are provided in-house. So, it's not an issue. And 2, you have vast energy stores ready to go. You have 2,000 calories of carbohydrate stored as glycogen, some in the liver, some in the muscle, and that will provide energy as glucose should you need it as an emergency, or you need it for critical functions. And then you have 50 times more calories stored as fat, and that is 50 times more calories in a normal weight person. So there's no problem with your energy stores. And we wanted to show that you don't need to eat food in order to consume energy, because your energy stores will last you for a long, long time. So we wanted to explore ketogenic metabolism at an extreme level. You call it extreme, it's sort of becoming normalized now. But what we wanted to do was put everything beyond doubt that, we're going to do this to such a level that normal day-to-day activities will be safe. It's a bit like when, these 4x4s that everyone drives around these days, they take them out to the desert, they take them out to mountain environments, sort of beat them up a bit, and they still drive. And then that if you sort of nudge a curb in a Waitrose car park in Frimley, that you're going to be okay. And that's the sort of thing we were trying to do. But we weren't trying to send our bodies into destruction. I'll talk about that later. What we wanted to show was, as people with type 1 diabetes, if we can fast for 5 days, then it is safe for people to skip breakfast if they're keto adapted. That you don't need carbs with insulin unless you're rescuing a hypo. Now, with a ketogenic diet, it's almost impossible not to eat some amount of carbs. But what we were doing with this was to deliberately withhold carbs to make the point, to go to the next level. Oops. And the third point was that if you are in if you're in nutritional ketosis, you don't end up in diabetic ketoacidosis. And we weren't alone. We weren't doing this on our own. We had a group of very knowledgeable medical advisors and supporters. Most of these people you see here were slated to do this in May, but unfortunately they were unable to reschedule for September. Sean Scott, a consultant anaesthetist with a strong interest in sports medicine, Campbell Murdoch, Dan Maggs, and Peter Foley, all GPs with a strong interest in metabolic health, and Natalia Roman Lopez, who is a person with type 1 diabetes, who trained with us whilst she was in Switzerland. She trained all the way to within 2 weeks, but couldn't make it because of the COVID regulations. And there were other people in the background who were giving us advice willingly and very enthusiastically, and we thank them for that. And we wanted to do serious science. We didn't just want this to be a stunt where we completed it without doing anything scientific. So we managed to organize metabolic breath testing to show that we were burning fat, hopefully. We managed to organise continuous glucose meters, and there's Gail wearing one there on the right arm, and Trudy doing a metabolic breath testing. We managed to get a company to provide us with ketone meters to measure beta hydroxybutyrate. We managed to get psychometric testing for mood and hunger, and we did weight measurements, cortisol measurements, which were required for the metabolic breath testing. And we were testing uric acid and other things, but we unfortunately didn't do enough of that testing to make it meaningful. But we did a lot of testing, bearing in mind this was a shoestring budget, and we had very few facilities in which to carry out very detailed sort of blood type research. And we had some great sponsors who willingly put their name to this project, even though when we conceived it and started out, we had no clue whether this was something that would be possible. But with all of our advisors and with all of our sharing of information and looking at information, we came to the conclusion this was a safe practice. And by the time we reached the start line in Henley-on-Thames, which is just to the right of Reading there in the south of England, we were all ready to go and eager to complete the project, and we were all enthusiastic that we'd do it. We chose the Kennington-Avon Canal because it finished in Bristol, and we hoped in May to finish on the eve of the Public Health Collaboration Conference, which unfortunately had to be virtual that year. The Kennington-Avon Canal is very pretty and it's very flat, so it didn't provide us with any undue sort of challenges that would be more difficult than we'd already given ourselves. And this is what serious science looks like when you're in the world of Planet Keto. So very pleasant September that year. Lots of things to see, nice canal towpath so you don't get lost, and all in all a very pleasant experience. And morning routines were based around getting the breath testing done, testing your ketones, testing your cortisol, filling in your mood scores, filling in your hunger scores, topping up your water and doing your stretching. And then off we went. We tended to rotate the groups, so we all sort of got to know each other very well. And some of us ran all the way, some of us walked, and some of us walked. But it was a very, very nice time. Here are the results. This is my own result here. As you can see, I get a pretty flat trace of glucose throughout. I think that's pretty good anyway. And the green bar is between 3 and 6. So I was achieving normoglycemia for most of the time. The red dots are calibration markers for the CGM. You can see the box on the blue box graph on the upper right screen, the respiratory quotient shows that I was burning fat throughout the whole of this. So it doesn't look like I was breaking down protein, although that was a crude marker for that. And my ketone levels, as in the bottom box, they went from 2 to 5.7, but they weren't anywhere near the range of diabetic ketoacidosis. Here's John Furness's result, nice flat traces, and as the same as myself, he had ketones in the normal range for this sort of lifestyle. Here's an interesting person here, Trudy Deacon's graphs, nice flat traces as you'd expect for someone without diabetes, ketone bodies within the nutritional ketosis range. But the interesting graph here is the pie chart at the bottom, which shows that she actually had blood glucose less than 3.1 for over 30% of the time. So almost a third of the time, she was technically in hypoglycemia. And that makes things interesting, doesn't it? Because the same happened to Gail on a slightly lesser scale, but she was in technical hypoglycemia for 12% of the time. So it seems that with people who are fat adapted and are burning ketone bodies to fuel their brain and their muscles, that we can tolerate slightly lower blood glucose than probably somebody who are sugar adapted and haven't got that metabolic flexibility. And there is evidence that people who are hypo on sugar adapted metabolism tend to feel symptoms at a much higher level of glucose than people on keto. That's just an observation. I'm drawing no conclusions from that, but I think it needs a lot more work because that's a fascinating area, and it may help us much more to understand type 1 diabetes metabolism based around sugar. I want you now to take a long, hard look at that graph and spot the two people with type 1 diabetes. The answer is you can't. Metabolism of people with type 1 diabetes is exactly the same as people with no diabetes. Nutritional ketosis is nutritional ketosis, end of. We're all in a good mood. There were no fights, no pushing each other into the canal out of frustration. The mood scores were remarkably positive for everybody on each day, and each graph is one day. And that was good news. We think it was the ketones causing a euphoric effect. And in fact, quite a few people found it difficult to sleep. They were sort of stoked throughout the night as well. We weren't really hungry. The people with type 1 diabetes had done at least 4 or 5 fasts over a 2 to 4 day period. And we were used to the feeling of hunger, and we got used to transitioning down into a 0-calorie environment without insulin. And hunger wasn't an issue after 48 to 72 hours in anyone. And most people got used to the psychological feelings around hunger in the first 48 hours. Weight loss was as expected. James Cracknell lost a little bit more weight than everyone else. It's possibly that he was had more glycogen on board, and he was losing that and losing water with it. And the respiratory quotient, apart from James, who the interpreters found a little bit difficult to interpret, everyone else was fully fat burning throughout the whole exercise. So we conclude that sugar does not need to be consumed for energy over distances of 100 miles. We concluded that the body has adequate fat stores for 5 days of energy supply over at least 100 miles. Now, we went to 5 days for a reason. We went to 5 days because we felt that there is evidence that ketones are protective against muscle loss, but we didn't want to get ourselves into the situation where we were chipping away at protein, muscle protein, in order to provide enough for the bodily functions. This wasn't a destruction test as such. This was a demonstration that nutritional ketosis is safe. So we chose 5 days for that reason. We chose 100 miles because for over 5 days, you can run or walk 20 miles a day. And if you get injured, you can still finish the day. So that was the rationale behind that. And 100 miles is roughly 20 to 25,000 calories. So that would really test the fat store and put us into nutritional ketosis. We concluded that people with type 1 diabetes do not need to consume carbohydrates as part of their diet unless they're rescuing hypos. As I said before, people with type 1 diabetes will inevitably consume some carbohydrates, but they don't have to consume them as part of their diet. And if they're fat adapted, they don't have to eat carbohydrates just because they're injecting insulin. If they're only sugar adapted and taking high volumes of insulin, they're much more vulnerable to unannounced hypos. So the safety aspect becomes more important for those people, and they find themselves snacking throughout the day. People on a low carbohydrate lifestyle do not need to eat carbs just because they're injecting insulin. And finally, nutritional ketosis does not lead to diabetic ketoacidosis. Even in these, what you might call extreme conditions of nutritional ketosis. Not another one, you say. Nutritional ketosis is now becoming something that is accepted in the metabolic health community. There are still people that don't think it's a safe practice. However, a group in South Africa have just completed exactly the same project as us. There are no people with diabetes in the group, but all of the people managed to do a 5-day fast. Everyone but one finished I think there are 7 people finished the event. One had to pull out on day 4 or 5 because of knee injury, which is disappointing. But there are no untoward incidents, and we're waiting for the data to be collected because they had the sponsorship of the University of West Cape in South Africa. So that's really exciting stuff. So we're starting now to normalize the whole concept of nutritional ketosis, which is great. So I'm eternally grateful to this group for enthusiastically embracing the 05100 project. So thank you. Please screenshot those web addresses if you haven't already got them. And I I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of the conference. So thank you, and hope to see you next year. Take care. Bye.